recorded. If you have a question that you don't want recorded, we'll figure something out. But I don't think it's going to be relevant per se for this evening. The topic is one that I've been interested in for a really long time, and I'm still interested in this topic, which means that I have not. I don't feel that I've conclusively tackled this topic. It's a very broad topic, and I don't feel I have a full understanding of it yet. So I apologize. Like if I think another 3 to 6 hours of research, and I would be in a better place. But this was not the week for that extra 3 to 6 hours of research. So you're hearing some ideas as a work in progress, and maybe some of you will fill in some of the gaps, and maybe at some other points I'll return to this topic and flesh it out, and et cetera. But I also have, if there is a lot has been written, actually, a lot has been published on this topic by serious philosophers, real philosophers who really understand the metaphysics at play and have a bigger grasp of the lumdus of the Talmudic learning as well. So if you want to follow up, I have bibliography I can provide. So let's so that's my apology, but I'm excited and to join with you and think this through and all the same. So thank you, and maybe somebody, I don't know, anyone here a philosopher? Anyone? No. Anyone here a physicist? You a physicist? You're a physicist. Oh, great. Oh, wonderful. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so maybe I'll just. Okay, at some point I'll just hand it over to you guys. Okay, or you'll just correct me when I veer off the path of what's remotely accurate. Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello. Okay, great. So let's. I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start by sharing the source sheet. And let's see where we are, and also share my screen if that's easier for some of you. But the source sheet is going to be in the. So, no. Why is this not working? Here. There we go. Okay, there you go. Oh, look at that, Einstein, very cool. All right. One little Einstein story, just whatever. The Einstein's papers were given to half of them are in Jerusalem. The Hebrew University has a lot of his papers. Princeton has also a bunch of his papers. I don't know where they're located. I think their actual physical papers are both in Jerusalem and in Princeton. But Princeton University Press has been publishing. Maybe Hebrew University had rights to them. The archivist at Hebrew University, who is in charge of the Einstein papers, is a Hasidic man who lives in one of the Haredi neighborhoods of Jerusalem, from Switzerland, who knows German, of course, and understands the Swiss, whatever background of Einstein, and he's like, that's his job. So I met him when we lived in Princeton. He came and wanted our help in finding Chalav Yisrael milk, and he asked where the kosher restaurant was, which meant that he came to us for dinner, and he told us about Einstein. He had a real intimate. He felt really close to him, like he had read his diaries and all his papers, and felt just a real deep affiliation with him. Felt he knew his soul in a really strong way, because he had read all his papers, was an archivist. He was in Princeton to negotiate some publication of some of his papers with the university. So that's one of my Einstein stories. Okay, so I'm also going to share my screen so we can look at this together. The topic that we're going to look at, the halachic topic, we're going to just explore it. Again, it's a very broad and kind of complicated halachic topic. Could be weeks of study to sort of understand it in a comprehensive way. We're going to sort of do it in a less comprehensive way, but you'll maybe get a sense of how interesting this topic is the concept of Bereirah, which can be translated maybe as retroactively determined. Something retroactively determined. And the context, it comes up in a number of different contexts. The one that I think is sort of maybe the simplest is the context of an Eruv. Now, not an Eruv like we are most familiar with, which is an Eruv Chatzerot, where you merge courtyards together to create one private domain in which carrying is permissible. This is an Eruv Tchumen. An Eruv Tchumen is like a boundary Eruv. In the halacha is that one is only allowed to walk 2,000 cubits on Shabbat outside of the border of the town in which you live. But you're allowed to say, well, actually, for purposes of this Shabbat, my residence, the place I live, is not going to be my actual house, but it's going to be this Eruv. I'm going to take some food, like a box of matzah and some tuna fish, and I'll put it by this tree 2,000 feet to the east of the town. I'm going to say, this is my makom shvita. This is the place. This is my eruv. This is where I want to, like, for the purposes of this halacha, I want this spot where my meals are, where my food is, to be considered as though this is where I'm spending Shabbos, where I'm spending the night. And then the radius, your 2,000 cubit radius, is from the eruv, not from where you actually live. And so if it's 2,000 cubits, so you had walk from your home 2,000 cubits to, no, couldn't be 2,000 cubits, because that would be 1,000 cubits, let's say, to the east of the city to your Eruv, and then you have another 1,000 cubits to the east of that Eruv in the other direction, and then that might be sufficient to get you into the other town where you want to visit, the next town over. Okay, this is not really relevant for most of us, because you could walk for days without leaving Chicago, or without leaving an inhabited area, right? Depending on, this is like, if you imagine a setting where towns have really defined borders, and at the edge of the town is like, you leave the town, there's like fields and forests and meadows and things like that. And so it's very distinct. I'm leaving the town now. This is the inhabited area is over. Now I'm in the fields and the meadows and the forests. And then I can only go 2,000 cubits, but maybe if it's maybe like 3,000 cubits, another 1,000 cubits, over the hill is the next town over. I want to visit Shabbos afternoon with my in-laws or whatever, or where, my teacher is giving a lecture Shabbos afternoon. I want to go there, and the shul over there, the neighboring town. So an Eruv can allow you to do that. The Eruv Tchumen. So far, so good? Familiar? Yes? Questions, or this is okay? All right, so monitoring all of your, okay. Please feel free to use the chat. I'll try to monitor the chat. If it's a small group, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question, but you can also use the chat as well. So the concept of Bereirah comes in with somebody who doesn't know where you, he doesn't know which direction he wants to go. So he says, if there's going to be an invading army is going to come from the east, I want my Eruv to be in the west so I can flee in the west. If the invading army is coming from the west, I want my Eruv to be in the east so that I can flee in the east, away from, right? And here's the first source. Okay, you can just read it directly. And then they come both directions, and they'll come to I want to be able to go either way I want. Lo by lo lakan lo lakan hareni kivnei ir. And if they don't come at all, I want to be able to stay in my city and have the full range of being a resident of my city. Another example, if my teacher, the chacham, is coming from the east, I want my Eruv in the east so I can meet him and greet him, or maybe make it to the next town where she'll be giving the lecture Shabbos afternoon. If they're coming from the west, I want my Eruv in the west. If they're coming from either direction, I want it to be in either direction. If they don't come at all, I want to be like a resident of my city and not have an Eruv. Right? If he has two teachers coming in two directions, he can go wherever he wants. So that's the Mishnah. The Gemara on this Mishnah says, "Amar Rav." Rav says, "Late manitan midetani ayo." So our Mishnah is the version of this Mishnah should not be accepted because of what Ayo taught. He's not a very common sage. So what did he say? He said, he taught, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Yehuda says, Ein adam matna al shnei dvarim kachad. You can't make two different tanaim. You can't make a double tanai, a double condition. Ella im ken bachachan the mizrach ervel mizrach. He can say the im bachachan the marav ervel marav avalakan ulakan. He can't say, he can't make I want to go. He can say, if he comes to the east, my Eruv is in the east. He can't say, you can't make a double tanai of it'll be my Eruv will be in the direction which he's coming. That's not a valid tanai. It's not a valid condition that you can make. My shna lakan lakan delo de ein Bereirah la mizrach l'ma'arav nami ein Bereirah. So it seems that the Gemara is associating this statement that you can't make a double tanai. Tanai is a condition. You're allowed to make conditions. Everyone agrees. That's not controversial in the Talmud. You're allowed to make conditions. You can say a couple. You could say a man can say to a woman, "You behold, you're betrothed to me. On condition that you give me a certain amount of money, or on condition that your parents agree, or on condition that it's going to rain tomorrow." Okay, you're allowed to make conditions. I'm going to buy this umbrella on condition that it rains tomorrow. You can make conditions, stipulations for your action. That seems to be allowed. The Gemara here is saying you can't make a double condition that kind of pulls you in two directions, but that gets overlapped with this concept of Bereirah. Bereirah means that retroactively it gets to be, it's determined, it's demonstrated retroactively that the choice was already determined at the outset, which is sort of different from a Tanai. A Tanai is I'm sort of setting up my halachic action, whether I'm buying something, I'm acquiring something, I'm making a statement, I'm making it dependent on something that's going to happen in the future. And whether or not that thing happens in the future will determine the force of my statement now. Bereirah is saying that right now, the future is already determined and known, and I just don't know what it is right now. Okay, I'm trying to think of a good example of it, right? Like, and this gets into, I forget, we had physicists and no philosophers, right? So I think Aristotle said that claims about the future aren't true or false, right? Tomorrow it will rain. That's not a true or false statement, right? It's a meaningless statement. It's a non-falsifiable statement. To say it rained yesterday, that's either true or false. To say tomorrow it will rain, that's sort of like that type of statement isn't subject to trueness or falseness, right? It's sort of beyond that rubric of trueness or falseness. Bereirah seems to be saying that if I say, right, that retroactively it will be determined that there was a true or falseness of my statement now about the future, right? So it's counter to Aristotle, perhaps, according to some, okay? So Eli Hirsch is an analytic philosopher, wrote a paper, Talmudic Destiny. I think this is the argument that he's making. To the extent that I understand his argument, this is what he's saying. That Bereirah is to say that Bereirah, again, it was literally Bereirah means like it was like Nivrar. It was demonstrated. It was clarified. It was retroactively clarified or retrospectively revealed. Okay, I don't know at the time that I'm saying it, that I'm doing the action, but afterwards, one of the things was true. So let's see. We're going to see another. Let's go to the next source. This is skipping a little bit tonight. It's actually Tanaitic disputes. The Tanya Hareni Ma'arev l'Shabbatot Shel Kol. Is a good another example. I'm making an Eruv for all the Shabbatot of the year. Ratziti elech lo ratziti lo elech. Okay, so I make my Eruv. I put my matzah box, in someone's garden shed. Okay, 1,000 cubits to the west of the city, and because I want to, go to the west, and then another 1,000 cubits on the other side of the hill is the next town over, where I have a friend who my chavruta. Okay, so I make my Eruv, and say this Eruv is going to be for every Shabbos. If I want, I can. If I want, this is maybe a better, clearer source. If I want to travel, then that's my Eruv, right? I make it for the entire year. If I decide actually I want to just stay home, then it's not my Eruv. And again, it makes a difference. If I stay home, if it's not my Eruv, then I have 2,000 cubits in any direction to any side of my city. If the Eruv is in effect for that Shabbat, then my 2,000 cubits is from the Eruv. So it gives and it takes at the same time, right? It gives me in one direction, because that's now the focal point of my radius, but it takes away in the other direction. So there's a cost to it. So if I would rather stay in my own home in town for the duration of Shabbat, I really don't want that to be my Eruv, because it constricts my motion in my own town where I live, right? But maybe I decide after lunch I want to go walk over to the next town and visit my friend. So the writer continues. Yom Eruv. Okay, so obviously on Friday, if I look at the sky, sunny day, the weather forecast is good, I want to travel to the next town this Shabbat. So if I have that clarity in mind before Shabbat begins, so then certainly the Eruv works, right? It's my food, it's there, I declare it to my Eruv anytime I want, and when Shabbos starts, at the time when Shabbos starts, as the sun is setting, I already have determined, I've decided I want to rely on this Eruv for this Shabbos. So that everyone agrees, that's not a problem. However, it's already dark, or Shabbos already began. I didn't know. I had made no decision. When Shabbos began, I didn't know what I wanted. Shabbos morning, oh, look, the clouds have cleared. Shabbos morning, the clouds have cleared. I want to go to the next town. Then what? So Rabbi Shimon Omer, Eruv, Eruv, v'chabim Amrim, ein Eruv, Eruv. So Rabbi Shimon says, yes, that works. Rabbi Shimon says, I can decide on Shabbos that I want to travel to that I wanted the day before, right? Because on Shabbos I wake up and I say, I want to travel to the next town, then already it was determined on Friday that I would want that. And that's how the Eruv can work. The Eruv only, right? You have to make your Eruv before Shabbos. It has to be in place and ready before Shabbos. And I have to declare it to be in effect. So somehow, according to Rabbi Shimon, I can wake up Shabbos morning, decide to travel there, and because the Eruv was all in place and ready, through this force of Bereirah, then it seems to work. And the Gemara says, well, I thought Rabbi Shimon didn't have Bereirah, he does have Bereirah, so that they figure they play, the Gemara here plays around with the Shita to make it work out. But that seems to be the place that seems to be the concept that's at play here. Another example, here's another example, a few lines down. If you can see my screen, oops, sorry, I didn't see that. If you see my little cursor on my screen, what's the case? Hayu lefanav shnei rumonim shall telef, two pomegranates, that truma and maestro, that tithes have not been separated from these pomegranates. V'mar im yerdu geshemim hayom hezet truma al zeh. V'im lo yerdu geshemim hayom hezet truma al zeh. V'hachanami ben yerdu ben lo yerdu de'ech b'derav klum. Okay, so he says, if right, you have to separate your fruit. You have produce. You have to say, this is truma. This is the tithe I'm giving to the Kohen, and this is the meiser I'm giving to the late, right? You have to designate. So he's saying, well, if it rains, this will be the truma, and this will be for me. If it doesn't rain, this will be the truma, and this will be for me. And then he waits. So the next day, so how does that work? So that also seems to be another example that gets thrown in. A few other cases here. Another good case. So, another example in Gittin. Rabbi Yochanan talks about brothers who separate an estate. That's another great example. That's considered lekuchoten. They're considered to be like purchasers one from another, and it all goes back. The estate returns, all their portions of the estate of their parent that they inherited goes back to common ownership during the Jubilee year. So it's not the status, like my portion of the inheritance is not considered as though it was, but this position, Rabbi Yochanan's position, is understood to be not Bereirah in the context of the Gemara's argument here. We don't say that it was always destined that this portion of the property would go to me and that the other portion would go to you, and this is how it would be divided. Rather, we say, no, each one of us took possession of a portion of the inheritance, but we took a portion of that from a common piece of property, the estate of the deceased parent. As opposed to saying, once we each took our pieces, it was as if we were always destined to have those pieces when our father was still alive. Okay, I was going to get the north field, my brother was going to get the south field, our other sibling was going to get the west field, and that was always meant to be, even when their father was alive. And so we're not like we're not purchasing from the estate, we're just taking the pieces that were always meant to end up to us. Rashi says, Lukuchoten, they are purchasers. Rashi says, De'ein Bereirah, there is no Bereirah, according to Rabbi Yochanan, this position. Because you can say, or you have to be concerned about the portion of the estate that this brother took was ra'ui, was sort of destined for, was meant for, could have ended up being owned by the other brother, and they switched. V'hainu l'kicha. That's a purchase, right? We all came to some agreement when we divided the estate, but it wasn't like destiny that we would each end up with the portions we ended up with. Maybe destiny would have come out some other allocation of how the property gets allocated, and so each one of us is a purchaser of some portion of this common estate that existed before our parent died. And that's why it goes back in the Jubilee year. It all goes back to the beginning. A few other cases. I don't know if you can just go into all the different cases. Do you understand why this is weird? Do you get? Somebody, Remy, you have a question? Or, oh.
I'm wondering how everyone's doing. I would check in. Bereirah is complicated.
Yeah. How are we doing? Questions, comments? This is
I have
weird,
a
right?
question. I
Yeah.
have a couple of questions.
Please,
I'm
let's
really
hear them.
confused. So first of all, if there's a will, in this last example, and the two brothers or however many siblings there are, know that they are getting this portion, that portion, whatever it is. I'm not sure why the thinking is that it could have been otherwise.
Yeah. Good.
And the second part of this also
Yeah.
is at what point, like how many years down the road does it become that brother's portion, so that ultimately he can give it to his
Yeah.
children,
Okay, good question. Good. So the first question, I don't think there are wills in halakha per se, right? Because a will, once somebody's dead, they can't. You don't get to do things when you don't get to allocate things when you can give things away when you're alive. Once you're dead, you can't give things away anymore because you're dead. So I don't think there's I don't, in a purely like halachic system, I think the property is like the estate like owns everything, and the heirs have to come up with some way to divide amongst themselves. I don't think there's any, but there is no will, and so unless the parent decides gives it while he's still alive, there is no will, and so really it's not necessarily, so if you, unless you say Bereirah, if you were to say, and the implication of this position is that the other position that Yochanan is contrasting is that if you do admit that there is Bereirah, then the brothers would get to keep, they wouldn't, like the property wouldn't revert in the Jubilee year. The brothers would get to keep their property because we negotiated, we fought, we argued, we went to court, whatever it was, and I ended up with the fields on the west, but that was the field I was always going to end up with originally. It's like mine already. In terms of how long does this go? That's a good question. I don't know the answer. How is Bereirah different from Tanai? Both can make action conditional on some future thing again. So that's the subtle piece. I think the difference, right? Tanai is a condition. A condition is I'm making my statement conditional, and I just say, if you don't understand it, I would say no one really quite understands it, and this is like a huge literature in the Rishonim trying to work this through. So I'm sort of bluffing by by acting as though I'm sort of answering your question, because it is like a vast literature in the Rishonim that I have not, alas, I've not mastered. Okay, I can send you further research, further sources, and maybe you'll have a better success than I. I think the difference at Tanai is very good. Yeah, for example, yes. That was one of my sources. That's from Rav Yair Khan, right? A Tanai is like a Tanai doesn't make an assumption about the knowability, the truthfulness of the future. Okay, a Tanai is it's a condition, right? I'm saying this is what I want my action to be conditional, and a Tanai has to be, if X happens, then I want this to be the case, and if X doesn't happen, then I don't want this to be the case, right? Like that's, like all of the like in the Torah, like in Sefer Bamidbar, when the tribes of Reuven and Gad say to Moshe, like, we will, if we march at the head of the army as we volunteered, then we will take possession of this portion in the eastern bank of the Jordan for our flocks and our herds, etc. Right? That's a Tanai, right? It's sort of saying, here's what we're gonna, if this happens, then here's what we're committing to do, right? Haret Mekudesh, you are betrothed to me if X or Y were to happen. Bereirah is saying that it was already, is that retroactively, once the event occurs, we realize it could have been no other way. And so there's an assurance that we discover later on existed at the time when, right? It's like, like Abraham Lincoln had, there was some, like he had breakfast for the last time one day, right? Okay, so like, and we know that's a fact that we know about the universe, that on whatever April something, Abraham Lincoln had his last breakfast. That's a fact about the past, that we're saying what was true about the future even before it happened. Okay, yeah, against Aristotle, right, that there's a truth statement that can be made about things that haven't happened yet. We don't know, right, until they've already happened. But once they happen, we go back and say this was always going to happen. Okay.
But isn't this Bereirah? I don't know. Maybe this is getting too belaboring a point too much. You want to move on, but isn't the mechanism of conditional gittin kind of similar to Bereirah?
Sorry, the mechanism. Say it again. Sorry, I didn't hear. Say it again.
The mechanism of a conditional get. Like if you're going to war and you say, you give your wife a get and say, if I don't return in 5 years, this is your get.
No.
So the actual giving of the get is now, but it's predicated on some future action or future occurrence.
No, I think it's not, because that's a Tanai. That's I mean maybe it's a look, it's a subtle difference, and if you have trouble articulating in clear language a subtle difference, then maybe you don't really understand it as well as you think you do. But so I'm going to try anyway, though. Tonight, right, again, this used to be done. The Talmud says that people, soldiers would go off to war, they would, the concern was if they would be taken captive or go missing, then their wives would be agunot, not in like the modern sense, but in the classic sense of a woman bound to a husband who may or may not be alive, and there's no way he's his body was never found, or so he can't be verified as dead, and neither can he divorce her, and so she would be bound forever. So the conditional divorce, you are if I don't return in 3 years, whatever, from war, you're divorced. And if they didn't return in 3 years, the divorce would take effect at the time of when it was given, when he was still there, right? When he was around, right? So that's sort of the retroactive kind of thing. It's different. The difference there is that somehow there are certain halakhic actions that don't require that same degree of certainty about. Well, here's the example here. Okay. A purchase, right? A get apparently doesn't require that degree of certainty. You can make, because you have to be certain which woman you're divorcing. The case that we skipped over was someone has 2 wives, and he says, I got too many wives. I only, whoever walks out of my door first, that's the one I want to divorce. Okay, so that depends on Bereirah, because the condition, or not the that depends on Bereirah, because you have to know who you're divorcing. You can't divorce one of my wives. You have to divorce a particular person. Okay, the name, that's like the core of the divorce. It's like the get is that the name of the person who's being divorced. So to say I'm going to divorce whichever woman leaves my house first, the first one I see, coming out the door of my house, that only works if you say Bereirah, because if you don't say Bereirah, it was not known which, you weren't divorcing a specific person. Whereas in the case of going off to battle, you know precisely whom you're divorcing. You just only want the divorce to take effect if certain external conditions pertain. Okay, that's the difference, right? Is it external, or is it like core to the act you're doing? So if I want to say, it's like I'm going to buy a house. There's another, right? I buy a house, and the real estate broker shows me 2 apartments, and they're both really good. So I say, all right, I want to buy whichever house my wife likes better. Okay, so I signed the contract. We do a kinyan. Okay, I purchase the house, whichever one she likes best. That depends on Bereirah, because that's saying, because you can't purchase something that you're not precise and know exactly what you're purchasing. And so I haven't selected a home. I haven't selected, I want to buy whichever apple, whatever it could be, whatever grapefruit my mother prefers. That's the grapefruit I want to buy. Like, that requires Bereirah for the kinyan, for the purchase to take effect, because you can only buy something if you know precisely what you're purchasing, and the seller has to know what they're selling. So if I'm going to say, I'm going to ask my mother, whichever one she likes best, that's the grapefruit I'm going to buy, then it could work, as opposed to the Tanai condition, where if I want to buy this apartment, if the bank approves my loan, then I want to buy the apartment, right? If I go missing in battle, I want to divorce my wife, right? There, precisely the terms of the halachic action, the purchase, the sale, the divorce, the marriage. You're just hinging it on something external. Okay, a note here. I can think of, Shira writes, I can think of plenty of examples outside Jewish life that helps. Sure. Fairy tales, folk tales, and fantasy often give certain privileges or tchotchkes to the most worthy one. Oh, that's interesting. The fairest of them all, or the chosen one. We, the reader, know that the big name movie star, the character whose name is on the title page, is going to get that privilege or magic sort of privacy, but the people in the story don't know that. I don't know. It's like Chekhov's gun, It's like it's like you see it in it, right? That's interesting, right? You're reading a book, the reader has knowledge the characters don't have. You can't sign a contract with the English magician or the chosen one. Oh, okay, wait, is that you? Right. Exactly. Right, Harry Potter, good. You can't write because even though it's we know and you could flip to the back of the book and find the answer, the characters don't know, right? And so if we're characters in a book whose end is foreknown, like maybe Bereirah works, we just don't, right? So I mean, Bereirah is saying you have to flip to the back of the book, or once you read the back of the book, you see how it was all foretold anyway, even for something that seems to be not foretold.
And then it turns out that the other kid was chosen for something. He was just chosen for something else, not the bit you were on in chapter
Right.
6.
Correct. Exactly. Exactly. Here's another, Rashi here talks about another, this is a case of somebody who is, he's shechting Korban Pesach for the first, like Korban Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice, you have to be part of the group that is like in the, whatever, the Chabura, like the, you can't just like, it changes the reality retrospectively. Tanai does not, changes the reality retrospectively. Mish, can you say a few more about, explain, say what you mean by that? How do you
Yes. So my understanding, Bereirah, what you do is you make determinations made in the future, but it changes the reality from day one, from initially. So it says when you said put your Eruv there, you put your Eruv for the east, not the west. The future will change the reality in the past.
Right.
You're changing. Right. You want to say that was the reality when you did it,
which is different from a Tanai. A Tanai is saying right now I'm conditioning my statement and my action on something that will emerge in the future. Bereirah is saying right now, it's like we could have, I will discover that there's only one thing that's possible for me to do right now. And I'll know that once I do the thing tomorrow, right? Once I wake up to, so I think the like, Rashi is another, this next Rashi here is, let me just get some numbers, let me add some numbers. Hold on. How do I do this again? Format, number sources. Okay, great. Source 6, okay. Rashi here, this is a case of somebody, he makes his Korban Pesach, he, whatever, 10 people whatever can join the Korban Pesach, he's not sure who they are, his kids are running to join him, so whoever gets here first, he'll be, or she'll be included in the Korban Pesach. So the ones who get to, but they weren't really, I didn't really know who they would be, right? I just said the first one who arrives, it's like, you imagine, like you invite your kids and, I don't know, like Linda, can you imagine you invite your kids and grandkids to Pesach and you say, we have room for 10 of you, at our table. So the first 10, you can spend Pesach with us. The 11th, sorry, no room, right? So it doesn't work like that. I know the Seder home doesn't work like that, but in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, that's really how it worked. You had to know in advance at the time of the Shechita of the who was going to eat that Korban Pesach. So if you say, well, this will be eaten by whoever shows up in time, the first one to, somehow that works, and according to the position that Bereirah pertains, that there is this retroactive determinism. Rashi says, Yesh Bereirah de mishat shchita haya zera ui lekach. At the time of shchita, the one who was going to arrive first was already ra'ui lekach, was like destined to be the one, was determined to be the one who would get there first. And so he's like included, like he was like there, like when he I checked it for the one who gets there first, like that was that one was going to get there first.
And I checked it for him.
I checked it for him. I didn't know who he was at the time, but later, it's like, oh, I found out. I guess that's who I, so I guess like sort of like I don't know. I had a moment, my wife and I worked at Princeton for 5 years. After 4 years, we very nearly left Princeton and took another job. And there was a synagogue that interviewed me, and the search committee wanted to offer me the job. And then I guess they presented that to the board, and the board went with the other candidate. So we very like late in the like rabbinic search process, we like stayed at Princeton for a 5th year, which paved the way to ending up coming to Chicago. It was all had a happy ending. But there was a moment even before that, before we came to Chicago, there was a moment in our 5th year at Princeton where like a student had a conversation with me about something that was on his mind that was troubling him, like a religious crisis he was having, and it was an intense thing. And I think I was helpful at that moment. And I just had the feeling after that meeting, it's like, oh, like this is why we had to spend a 5th year in Princeton. Like that's why it had to, like I had to be here for the student. Like he needed me at this moment, in a way, like, you know, like it had to work out this way. So that I don't know if like there are like moments in life sometimes where you have that sense of like it had to be this way, because like the contour of my life, the narrative of my life's journey makes sense in a certain way with things unfolding. And so like I did at the time when like I was very disappointed that, you know, I didn't get offered this job. And then, you know, I was like, oh, like 3 months later, I was like, oh, now I understand why really I couldn't have been offered. Like I had to be here. Like I was needed here for something. So that's, I don't know, that's a little like touchy feely. I was gonna share that story. So touchy feely, but this is a little bit more, this is much more like tachlis, much more like dollars and cents. Somehow we get to say, no, like you didn't know it at the time, but this is what you're always going to do. You're always going to wake up Shabbos morning and decide I'm going to take advantage of that Eruv and walk to the west. You just didn't know that on Friday afternoon. Stevie Green, seems like Bereirah is often about making a selection, whereas tonight is about doing or not doing. So yes, that's true. That could be true. And I just like it's a little more complicated because we had that source about you can't make a double tonight, but that's somehow different from Bereirah. There's a very long Ramban, which I don't think we can look at ourselves right now, but that is also discussed in the Rishonah. It's grist for the mill. So what do we, let's see, what can we? Yeah, so here's Rabbi Irkan. Rabbi Goldie already shared the link to his one of his articles, like an article on. So here's what he said: in light of all this, it makes sense that the question of Bereirah focuses on the present, so that there will be meaning to writing the get in the present. At the time of the writing, there was a need to write the get on behalf of a specific woman. The same applies to slaughtering the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering. The registration is brought into effect at the time the lamb is slaughtered, right? Who is going to be included in this? And therefore require the registrants, everyone who's eating the Korban Pesach, the Paschal Sacrament together, to be in existence at that time. Similarly, when it comes to allocating tithes, Truman and Maestro, it's clear that we require an object of wine at the time that the priestly portion and tithes are effectively named, for if one does not name a certain object of wine, the rest of the wine thus cannot be released from its untied status. One who drinks it is liable. Thus, it appears that according to the one who says that Bereirah is tenable, yesh Bereirah, this does exist, one may define the present based on the future. That's very nice. Define the present based on the future. And if so, in a case of purchasing wine from among the Kutins, an allocation of tithes takes effect immediately upon those 2 pints, which, okay, that's the case we didn't see. If we maintain that Bereirah is tenable, those pints of wine will be identified retroactively, and in the future, when one allocates them, it becomes clear that the previous act of naming took effect upon these pints, which one is now. That's the case of I buy wine from a kuti, right? So it's not he hasn't separated his tithes yet, so I can't drink the wine. It's not kosher. To make it kosher, I have to separate out a portion for the Kohen. So, but I don't have time because I'm traveling, right? I don't want to do that right now. So I drink some wine. I say, oh, I'm right now going to separate and designate as truma the wine in my barrel. It's all sloshing around and mixed up in my wine barrel I just purchased. But I'm going to say the 2 pints that I am going to pour out tomorrow and give to a Kohen, that's going to be my truma. And then I can take wine and drink it in the meantime. Because I've already separated the truma. How have I separated the truma? By declaring, not by, normally you would say, if you have a heap of grapes, you say, I want the grapes that are on the left, to be truma, and then I can eat the grapes on the right, because I've already, designated. Even if you don't separate them out and remove them, I can just say, I have a big pile of grapes, a big pile of wheat. I want to say the portion that is the 10% of my pile of produce that's on the left or on the north of this pile of produce, that's going to be my truma. And then I can eat from other parts of it, even though I haven't physically removed it. Here, it's wine in a barrel. And I'm saying, when I open the spigot tomorrow and take out a portion and give it to a Kohen, like today, right now, that's my truma. So I don't know which molecules of wine, right? How could I possibly identify which molecules of wine are going to end up in the cup that I give to the Kohen today, right? When I'm drinking the wine, by saying, oh, I've already, the Kohen's going to, tomorrow I'll pour it out, and that's going to be what today I decide is my truma. That's not a tonight. That's not a condition. Okay. That's saying that I can somehow today identify which molecules of wine are designated and declared to be truma based on where they're going to be tomorrow. This may be the best example of all. I'm sure I've opened with it, okay? Right? Molecules of wine in a barrel. And I'm going to identify, 10% of them as being truma. And how do I know which ones? They're the ones that when I open the spigot tomorrow, they're going to fill my cup. So that seems to only work if I can say today, I can speak of the molecules that are going to end up in the cup tomorrow. Right? Rav Khan writes, granted, their identity becomes clear to us only in the future, but in any case, this is only a subjective lack of knowledge on our part at this point in time. On the objective level, even now, there's a certain woman who may be defined as whomever I choose, and her identity will be clarified when the mists of time clear. Even now, there are molecules of wine determined as the ones I'm going to pour out to my cup and go to the Kohen. I just won't know which ones they are until tomorrow, but they exist now. All right, I'm going to turn it over to the physicists. Is this true? Okay. What does physics say? Are the molecules of wine that end up in my cup tomorrow going to, can they be identified? Are they known? I don't know, right? If I can identify the location of every molecule in a barrel, can I predict which ones are going to be in the cup tomorrow when I open the spigot?
Well, no, but you could, if you pour some wine out of the barrel, determine that none of that wine will be what's in the barrel tomorrow.
That's not good enough, right? Because I have to.
Well, I'm saying if you drink some of the wine, then there's still wine left. It's going to be different wine.
But that's not. It's not. Wine's not kosher. The wine's not kosher until I designate 10% of it as truma to Meiser, right? So I have to.
Right, but otherwise, it's. Yeah. I mean, like the wine obviously exists, but it would be indeterminable, but but only in the sense of like there's no way to calculate that.
So I think so. Maybe with molecules of wine, that's true. I think, and here's where I'm really veering far afield from my understanding. This is like sort of one of the shifts that occurred in the like quantum physics like revolution of the 20th century, was that movement away from like a deterministic mechanical like Newtonian universe, right? Where if I had a computer big enough and I could input all the data of where every single atom is inside of wine inside this barrel, then I could predict with 100% precision which precise molecules of wine will pour into the cup tomorrow. Just all it's a question of is inputting enough data, and that like that's how the universe works, right? That's how big things work. That's how like I can predict billiard balls, right? That's how some big things work within certain defined parameters, like things right? Billiard balls, like I can predict that pretty well, or like a basketball going into a hoop, right? A physicist could tell you at the moment the ball leaves the hand of the basketball player whether or not it will go into the hoop or not. That I think is true. Okay, but
well, at the quantum level, nothing can be absolutely deterministic. So, you were talking about molecules of wine. I'm sitting here with a dead fish look on my face, wondering, is it the molecule? Is it the atom? Do we have to be at the subatomic level? When does this predominate? But as far as the final states go, everything is in a mishmash of probabilities, and quantum physics states you don't see which of the two atoms is going to be the decayed one, for which the term half-life is perfectly accurate, and which is going to be the undecayed one saying, nah, I got a whole life and you only got a half-life. There's going to be one of the two. You do not know where it is. Literally, both of them are 50% decayed and 50% undecayed until the future becomes the present, becomes the past. And you're like, oh, that experiment happened today. I looked it up on Facebook, and then you know. So at a quantum level, if you're doing, the electrons in the atoms of the alcohol in the wine, They are simultaneously in a quantum superposition state of truma and not truma. And if
Yeah.
you hear a whale, it sounds like somebody's just gone face down at his scroll in Pumbedita. That's some poor, Gaon or Amora trying to wrap his head around that. But by the time you get to macroscopic wine, there are just so dratted many of them that you sort of segue into that classical deterministic, you shot it at the basket, you didn't miss, I think it's going to go in unless a jet plane comes in and takes it away. The question is, how small does the halacha go and how much of a chance is it going to have? Like you were talking about wine in the barrel. If the dregs have all settled to the bottom and then you tap the barrel from the bottom, I'd say you've got a pretty good chance that the wine that's more or less in the bottom quarter is going to go in your mug and the top quarter is going to be truma.
So it could be any one of these cases. Yeah, sorry.
That is as a practical matter, it's right, aside from the quantum aspects, but even the physics of 150 years ago, chaos theory would say that you would need such, such precise information to predict beyond a certain, amount of steps into the future that it might theoretically be achievable, but it would not in any usable sense be achieved.
Right. You need a computer the size of the universe that, computing for the length of time, in order to get an answer. But in theory, maybe it's still, I guess I'm wondering, like it's my sense is that there's at the quantum level, the subatomic particle, there is no, like, it's both yes and no.
Correct,
alive. The cat is alive and dead.
What we know about modern physics, the states are not right, are not separate, right? Like in this, like there's they only exist in probabilistic.
And when you have large things, like large complex, like the weather also is like maybe too, like it's too, also it behaves in that similar, like you can't predict the weather either. Maybe also it's too complex and too
the weather is closer to the classic example of just being right. It's a chaotic system, so any minuscule variation in initial conditions will grow exponentially.
I see.
So there's no matter how sensitive your data is, it's not going to be useful beyond a certain point.
So I guess what I'm, to me, what's sort of captivating about I guess mostly the quantum, that's the Einstein Bohr. Like Einstein, I think my understanding is that he was less comfortable with the direction of quantum physics, and he, God doesn't play dice with the universe, and this sort of troubled him, right? And he was sort of kept on searching for a way to like restore that degree of, I guess, of certainty or determinism or whatever you want to call it. That seems almost like a Yesh Bereirah kind of position, and the position of Bohr and the more like robust quantum physicists is like an Ein Bereirah position, insofar as it just can't be. I cannot identify like the set, all the molecules that are going to end up in the cup tomorrow is not a set that I can, let's say all the atoms, I don't know, all the atoms in this barrel, they're going to end up in the cup that I give to the Kohen tomorrow, is not a set that I can identify today. Or the wife of mine who's going to leave the house first tomorrow is not a meaningful statement I can say today about somebody else's behavior tomorrow. Or the child of mine is going to show up and get that 11th spot at the Pesach Seder when I'm shechting my Korban Pesach right now. That's not a meaningful kind of thing to say about the universe, because there's that degree of determinism isn't operable in the way events unfold.
I've actually studied that question with another physicist. I wish you were here. Any of you know Dr. Josh Burton, who davens at Matovu. He came to lecture in my AP physics class. Einstein set himself very much in opposition to this kind of thought because he saw it as a moral stand against the forces of chaos. And as a Jew in the 1930s and 1940s, he was willing to bang his physics upside with the hammer until it assisted him in his moral stand against chaos, which he could then overlay on world politics and say chaos is not the solution. And it was in that context, he did not want God to be playing dice with the universe, that he saw this. It could be anything. There's no predicting, as stepping back to tohu vavohu. And he saw the whole point of creation, metaphysical or metaphorical or whatever it was, to be something, some higher power imposing order and structure on the universe. Now, the case of the weather, I think Stevie explained very well, it is deterministic. It's just so dratted complicated that, you know, by the time you get the computer the size of the world, it's just going to say 42, and then you're going to have to figure out the answer. But in the case of which child gets the 11th spot at the Pesach Seder, there are two completely different set of constraints. One of them is totally deterministic. Traffic. I don't know how it works. I hate it. But if people go to get master's degree in traffic flow, and civil what's-this, and then they get positions with the village and they decide when to add a 6th lane. Apparently,
isn't that like the weather though?
Exactly. But there's something about the 11th child that's not like the weather, because the 11th child, unlike the weather, has free will. And I've heard it explained to me as a quantum physicist rapping with other observant Jews, that weird superposition of you never know what's going to happen is what gives us free will in the soggy bag of mostly water that is our brains, that has molecules going this way and molecules going that way, and electrical impulses and synapses and hormones. But the one thing we can't explain, why this and not that, that comes down to the quantum uncertainty. And that's where human beings get free will, that cogito ergo sum.
Wow. Okay. That's fascinating. That's really okay. That's really cool. That's really cool. Right. So let me thank you. That's very helpful. I want to try to summarize what we've explored so far. Okay. And this is, I guess, for me, very much a work in progress. So and hopefully, if it sparks more study and thought on your part, then so much the better. We have already in the Tannaitic period, the earliest of rabbinic literature, we have a dynamic of Bereirah, which, let's say, we translate as retroactively revealed to have been, future events that are retroactively revealed to have been preordained, or and this is a controversial stance in the Talmudic literature, and the halacha is divided amongst those who are willing to work within this concept and those who are not. And this can be understood as exploring a position of like philosophy, a position of metaphysics, right? Like, again, like contrary, like Rashi takes a position contrary to Aristotle, right? Where Aristotle says statements about the future are not, don't fall under the plane of true or false. And Rashi is saying, no, the position of Bereirah is saying that we find out that statements about the future can be true or false. And when they're true, then they have implications. When we discover that we said true things about the future, then they have implications. And so that's like a philosophical way of trying to make sense of this, and that presents Rashi as being in opposition to the position of Aristotle, which is totally fine. Rashi was worthy of of having a position against Aristotle if he wanted to, like Megillah. Okay, he deserved to be. I also think this evokes kind of like the sort of emergence in modern physics of this breakdown of like the classic deterministic mechanistic universe, the in a kind of, I guess the Ein Bereirah position is, I think, kind of is sort of telling us that the future was not, didn't only have to, the present didn't have to, our present could have been different. The way things ended up now didn't have to end up like they ended up now. And at some point in the past, it was in fact not determined that they would end up now. That's the Ein Bereirah position. The position of Bereirah is that we see the way things are now and we retroactively, assume that it had to be that way. And I think that seems to me it's a way that I don't fully understand, but some of you do, and others do, is a topic that is like kind of seems very fresh in the world of physics as well, right? Of the degree in which, right, again, the world that Newton like kind of created for us, of billiard balls and planets, things bumping into each other and forces and so on, actually. In different ways, but breaks down in very large complex systems like the weather and traffic in a city, and in a really very, very profound and weird way breaks down on the subatomic level, right, where particles exist in two states at once, or they're half one way and half another way. And that, I think, that's a way of thinking about the relationship of the future and the past, of the multiple options that exist at once, that, right, like so let's one last, right, I'll close with this. Okay. And again, I'm speaking about things I don't fully understand. Schrodinger's cat, right, is the case. You have a subatomic particle, it's in one state or the other, and that state is linked to the release of poison gas, right, which will kill a cat that's in a box with, okay, in this thought, there's no real cat. No cats were harmed in this experiment. It's just a thought experiment. So Schrodinger argued that the cat is alive and dead at the same time, because the subatomic particle is, it's in one state or the other. So the poison gas has been released or it hasn't been. And you can't know until you open the box and see. And once you open the box and see, it'll be one or the other. But until you open the box, the cat is like connected to the subatomic particle. It's like alive and dead at the same time. I think that's kind of the same as like my Eruv is in the east or at the west. Right, my Eruv is to the west, or where my friend is, or it's here, or I want to spend Shabbos here in the city, and I'm going to decide tomorrow. Right, until that future event, emerges, it's like exists at like both states at once, and both, right. Where can I go for shot? Right, I go to sleep Friday night. It's like I have like two Eruvs, like two clouds of probability. My Eruv in the east and the west. It's like a cloud of probability hovering over my Shabbos domain. And then once it determines where my teacher is or where I want to go, then that's like the box opening, the cat being alive or dead. My Eruvs in the east or the Eruvs in the west. So that also is a way in which I think like the rabbinic literature can like kind of like model some of these probabilities in a way that I think is, I don't know, it's kind of cool. The other example of this, gosh, I wish I should have, which is also in kashrut as well, right? Okay, this I'll close with. In kashrut, things are nullified in 60 times. Most items that are not kosher are nullified in 60 times their volume. Okay, I have 1 cc of bacon that falls into my cholent, 60 cc's of cholent. It's nullified, leaves no taste, has no impact, and everything is kosher. If I have 1 cc of bacon, up in my kitchen, and I have 2 pots, each with 30 cc's of, cholent, and it falls into one of them, but I don't know which one, halakha is that they're both kosher. Okay, because I know that it's like a cloud of probability of which pot it fell into, and it's as though it's in both of them at once, and my bacon is nullified in 60 times its volume, even though it's actually presumably like it's in one of 2 of those pots where it wouldn't be, right? It's only 330 cc's against it. That also seems to be a way in which like we have this cloud of probability that sort of extends over finite objects, and they're in like 2 places at once. Like it could be in this pot, it could be in that pot. So we're going to consider it's in like both pots. So we're going to distribute the location of this bacon over the 2 pots that are in my kitchen, and it's
experiment. Yeah. That's easy. So the double slit experiment is a classic quantum test where you send an electron through a sheet that's got 2 holes in it, or it could be more, and a pattern will emerge on the sheet behind it that shows that its probabilities of where it's going are interfering with each other, as though the electron is going through both slits at once.
Yeah. So that exists in kashrut too. My bacon falls into a pot. Neither pot has enough kosher food to nullify the taste of the bacon. It's like it's in both of them at once. And maybe that's a better case maybe than some of the others we looked at. That seems to be like also a way in which we're kind of playing with like uncertainty, and we're using it to distribute probabilities rather than doing something a little bit more concrete and like logical in our everyday logic, right? So that's another good example. So I think, I don't know, I think this is cool. I think this is fun. I don't know if there's like greater significance to this than just like a cool like parallel of like a rabbinic way of thought, which sort of is sort of echoed now and picked up by a way that physics is thinking. And that's the extent that I've developed this idea now, but I hope to go back. Any other thoughts or questions?
Just clarify for like Schrodinger's cat, for example, if, right, some sort of state that's, you know, from one perspective is a mixed state of two different states, could be a stable state in a different angle. So if you have light that's polarized in the X direction and you look at it in the Y direction or the Z direction, it will look like a mixed superposition of states because it's polarized in the X direction, and it can't simultaneously be polarized in more than one direction. So if you have a neutrino, right, that's has a stable mass because it's still bouncing around inside the sun, right? Because it's still in the vacuum in between the sun and the earth, and it reaches the earth and it starts interacting with matter, and then it's going to have not a stable mass, but it's going to have a stable what's called flavors, right? An electron neutrino, right? But then its flavor could be different when it reaches the earth, because when it was in a mass state, it had a stable mass, but not stable flavor. And when it's in the earth, it has a stable flavor, but not a stable mass. So like the Schrodinger's cat is not only alive and dead because we don't know. It's because there could be some other thing that's sort of taking precedence, that's where it's stable in that range of options. It's a single thing. That single thing translates to two different things in the direction that you're interested in.
Right. I think that is that would be I think in the kashrut case of like kind of something fell into one of several pots and I don't know which one, so it's distributed, but maybe the question, can I eat all the pots or not? Maybe that's a secondary question. Maybe I can only eat one of the pots. Because I eat all of them, maybe it kind of takes away my plausible, like once I eat all of them, I've definitely eaten the bacon, and I definitely ate it out of a pot that didn't have 60 times its volume once I start eating them. So maybe that question is sort of a little bit akin to something being stable from one perspective, but once I take certain actions, that kind of gets undermined. I'm not exactly sure. It's in the Eruv case, in the case of I'm going to buy one of two apartments or I'm going to divorce one of two wives, those are all binaries, right? It's yes or no, east or west, right? And it's like one variable that will determine one of two. So it's a much simpler setup, right? It's X or Y based on Z. Or something like that, as opposed to what you're describing now, which is like multiple variables, each of which like breaking a different way depending on the perspective you're analyzing, which you might have in some of these kashrut, cases of, things, something non-kosher falls into this pot, and then from that pot, a piece falls into a third pot. And then how do I add up the various probabilities of where it is, or the quantities in order to nullify it or not? And then, how much of it can I eat before I have to stop? So that maybe seems a little bit more akin to some of the more complex things.
Just wait 6 hours between pots.
Right. There are positions you can eat all of it. I mean, it's really wild, right? There are positions that you can eat. You have a treif chicken that gets mixed up with some kosher chickens, and you can like eat all the chickens, right? I mean, it's sort of wild, right? Somehow like the nullification seems to like be very, very powerful force, right? So I don't know if you try, whatever, we don't try that at home, but that does seem to be something that works. All right. I think I want to pause because we could talk about this for much longer, but the expectation value of the probability density of any given pot is less than something that I always thought that they were bit normalization. I don't think I know what that means, but the mouse the bread in its mouth either left the chametz in your house or didn't. Well, that's good. Good. Okay. Probability. I mean, probability is interesting. Like it's a whole other probability. You know, as like math as a field of mathematics is surprisingly recent, and like a number of mathematicians in the last 50 years have tried to write about Talmudic probability using the mathematical tools of like modern mathematics of probability, and it's not so simple to do. It's like a number of them have tried, either successfully or not. But I don't really understand the math well enough, and I'm not sure I understand the Talmud well enough. But it's a complicated. Like you can I'm happy to give references. There's like really like quality scholarship on that, but it's not so simple because probability I think is relatively new field of mathematics, and so the probability thinking of the Talmud is like it's just hard to like kind of reconcile. And I think the distribution of like probability is like seems to me much like more of a physics kind of like a quantum weirdness kind of dynamic than a probability dynamic. Okay. Thank you so much. If you have other ideas or questions, please circle around and follow up, and I'll keep thinking about this, and maybe in some other future time we'll gather again to talk about some of these concepts. But I really I had a lot of fun. So thank you so much for joining. Take care.
Thank you.